the response to dealing with inflation right now is for us to be careful. I don't think launching on a spree of unfunded promises costing tens and tens of billions of pounds is the sensible thing to do. I think it risks making the situation worse, risking it lasting far longer. But also, it just means, as I said, all we're doing when we do that is putting lots of borrowing on the country's credit card. We're asking our kids and our grandkids to pick up the tab. So I don't think that's right. I don't think that's fair.
On the public sector pay saga that's well, we'll of course bring up with Liz Truss in a bit. She's apparently had a change of heart on regional pay boards for public sector pay. Do you accept her clarification?
Well, look, I'll let Liz speak for herself. I'm glad she U-turned on that policy because I don't think it was the right one, and it would have meant, I think, potentially, almost 500,000 workers in Wales getting a pay cut, which I don't think is the right policy to pursue. I think you level up by spreading opportunity around, by creating things like free ports, jobs and prosperity, by cutting people's income tax. That's how I'd like to do it. I don't think cutting the pay of hundreds of thousands of workers here, and indeed across the regions of the United Kingdom, is a Conservative policy that we should adopt, and I'm glad that she's changed her mind on it.
On the climate and well-being, the Wellbeing of Future Generations Act has been in Wales since 2015. Would you support efforts to replicate that across the rest of the UK?
Sorry, the
Wellbeing of Future Generations Act. Which is there are 7 well-being goals, which is basically an attempt to try and combat poverty and insist that all companies in the public sector, private sector as well, public sector predominantly, have to actually live up to these goals in order to ensure future generations' well-being.
Right. Well, I don't know the details of the Act in specifically, but I mean, look, that doesn't sound like the right way to do it. I think the right way to do it is to spread opportunity and reduce poverty by providing a brilliant education for all our children in the first instance, right?
I'll then go away and dig into the detail of the Act as well.
The size of the Cabinet Office, which currently stands at 10,020, and for ensuring that civil servants return to their desks.
Yes. So, as one of the things that one of the last few things I did as Chancellor was start a process with the PM of asking all the departments of government to come back with a plan to cut the number of civil servants by a significant amount, to reduce the civil service back to levels that we saw years ago. Because a coalition government actually deserves enormous credit for being quite tough on this and driving out efficiencies. And a few years ago, 4 or 5 years ago, we slightly took our foot off the gas and the numbers have creeped up. And together with the PM, we set out a mission for everyone to come back and tell us how they were going to cut the numbers. So all those things were just coming back when I resigned. So I'd like to carry on with that plan and get civil service numbers back to where they were 5 years ago. But how are we going to do that? We're going to do that by reforming public services more generally. Because if we all want to reduce the size of the state, which we do, if we all want to reduce the tax burden, which we do, we have to think boldly and differently about public services across the board. Because a civil service alone is not going to deliver the income tax cuts that we all want to see. We need to reform the NHS if we're going to do that, because it's the NHS that's swallowing up more pounds of everyone's here, and if we don't grip it and reform it, we will never be able to get the tax burden down, and that's why I want to be bold and radical on that, which is why I set out a plan to tackle this issue of missed appointments, because for too long, millions and millions of hospital and GP appointments go missed, and that's a waste, and it's not wrong, and people are abusing the system. So if we can try and change that, change behaviour, be tough on those, make sure that people cancel those appointments in advance. Do you know what we've done? We've just created tons more healthcare. We can get the backlogs down faster, and it won't have cost anyone here a penny more in money or taxes. So that's the kind of radical thinking we need, not just on civil service numbers, but across the public services. And I will bring that different type of thinking because I want to get the tax burden down. I want to get the size of the state down, and I've got a plan to deliver it for you.
I'm sorry.
You say you have a strategy to tackle the small boats coming across the channel, which is getting completely out of hand. Can you be more specific? Can you tell us exactly what it is that you're going to do and what's going to be different?
Yes, I can. So look, in long form, on my website, there's a 10-point plan, there's a video, so if you've got 5 minutes, if you care about this issue tonight, please go home and have a look. I'll give you a couple of elements of it now. One is, we need to move away from the ECHR definition of asylum, right? It is, yes, you're right, we should clap that because it is important, right? It is far too broad and allows lefty lawyers to exploit it and frustrate our efforts. So I think we should move to the Refugee Convention, which is another international legal standard, but it is narrower and tighter and will give us a greater ability to say to people, you can't stay.
So we can tackle inflation by constraining demand or increasing supply. So what would you do to increase supply of renewable energy so we can bring down cost of energy? Will you be bold enough to scrap the embargo of wind, onshore wind, in England?
So yes, in a nutshell, we've already said that we are open to do that, where we can do it with local communities, right? Now that has proven difficult, but I think actually with the different economic incentives, it might be possible that we can get that to work. We also, ditto, could look at that with fracking, by the way. So that's another thing where, again, if we can do it with local communities, we should look at it. But we can do a couple of other things. I talked about the free ports that I want to bring to Wales. The first one that we set up in Teesside. Offshore wind manufacturing is going gangbusters. GE are investing there and creating jobs because that's a growth industry for us. If we can crack small modular reactors, North Wales is a place where you could do that alongside the big plants. That's how we'll increase homegrown supply of energy. But we can also do something else in the short term. We can make sure that we insulate homes better, because there's a lot of government money and it's not well spent at the moment. And if we can help people with their loft insulation, their cavity wall insulation, temperature controls, relatively simple things that don't take very long, that don't cost a fortune, we can actually save people 300 quid off their energy bills and improve our energy security by reducing demand.
Welsh Conservatives have been in opposition in the Senedd for nearly 25 years. How are we all going to work together to kick out these Corbynistas and get into government so we can have a Welsh Conservative government in Cardiff working hand in hand with a Conservative government in London?
Yeah. Well, I tell you what we do. You know, Hannah mentioned, I want to be an activist Prime Minister when it comes to Wales. We need to call out devolution for failing when it's failing. As we talked about, the Welsh Government are letting down people in Wales with schools that are underfunded, right? What do we have in Wales? We have a stagnant economy, we have spiralling waiting lists in the NHS, and we have chronically underfunded schools which are depriving people of a life of aspiration and hope, right? The answer to that question is not more devolution. The answer to that question is calling out the Labour government for what they're doing and having the UK government do more.